Today's lesson is all about something called the Nazi-Soviet Pact. This is one of the final steps to World War II. So what we're going to be aiming for in today's lesson is to make and justify a reasoned judgment about how significant this particular pact, this event was. In order to get there, we're going to have a look at the details of this pact and when and why it was created. And we're going to look at it in a little bit more detail and see how it led to the invasion of Poland. So could you put how significant was the Nazi-Soviet Pact as the title for today's lesson, please? In your starter with your teacher today, you've already had a look at what Hitler had already accomplished and had already taken over by 1939. So we know that Germany had expanded. He'd taken over Austria, taken over the rest of Czechoslovakia. We know that East Prussia remained as part of Germany, but was split by the Polish corridor. So the natural thing was that Hitler would now try and take over Poland. Hitler wasn't even in the slightest bit worried and concerned about Britain or France. Britain and France had let him remilitarise the Rhineland. They had let him rearm. They had let him take over Austria, and they had handed him over the Sudetenland. Even when he broke the deal and the Munich Agreement with them in March of 1939, Britain and France did nothing. He wasn't concerned that they would do anything. He believed they would continue appeasing forever, and he could take over Poland without worry about Britain and France. They had signed an agreement with Poland that they would defend Poland. This was in April 1939 if Hitler did try and take over. But Hitler thought they were bluffing. He'd decided at this point that Britain and France were spineless. They had no backbone. They were worms. But he was concerned about Russia or the USSR. So you've got Germany here, Poland in the middle, and Russia here. If Germany took over Poland, that might be seen as a direct threat to Russia, and therefore he was concerned about that. So this lesson, we're going to look at how he dealt with the threat of Russia, because Poland has always been a key target. This would make him really feel that he'd achieved his foreign policy aims. The way that Hitler decided to deal with the issue of the USSR was to sign a treaty, a pact with them. So in August 1939, the Nazi-Soviet Pact was signed, sometimes known as the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. And this was where Hitler and Stalin, Russia and the USSR agreed not to fight each other. There was also a little bit of a secret deal about what was going to happen with Poland. Just have a little think for me, Year 9, about why this might be incredibly shocking to the world. Think about the relationship between these two leaders. Throughout the 1930s, Hitler had made no secret of the fact that he hated Stalin and he hated the communism that was the way that Russia was ruled. Remember, in the late 1930s, he'd even signed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Italy and Japan, and had tried to destroy the communists in Spain. Therefore, a deal between these two seemed incredibly unlikely. But in the end, a marriage of convenience is made between these two men. This lesson is looking at the story of how and why that happened and the impact that that had on the world. What happened then? So Poland was clearly Hitler's next target. We saw that from the map that we looked at a moment ago. We know from here he's already taken over Czechoslovakia, he's already taken over Austria, Poland, and reuniting West Prussia with the rest of Germany was a key target. So Poland was clearly Hitler's next target once he'd taken Czechoslovakia in March 1939. The Germans had disliked giving up West Prussia, Posen and Silesia to Poland in 1919. They particularly disliked the way that East Prussia had been cut off from the rest of Germany by the Polish corridor. In April 1939, Hitler demanded that all the old German lands which had been given to Poland should be returned. The British and French governments decided that appeasement was now over. They made a clear promise to defend Poland if they were threatened by Germany. However, Hitler did not take this threat seriously because of the British and French inaction over his previous aggressions. At this stage, however, Hitler was not willing to act. An attack on Poland would have been seen as a threat to the Soviet Union, to Russia. Therefore, if Hitler attacked Poland, he faced a possible war with Britain and France, which he felt was unlikely, and Russia. This was too big a gamble. So what I would like you to do, please, Year 9, is I'd like you to pause the video now. I'd like to put a side heading background, and I'd like to answer these 4 tasks based on what we've just read through together there, in nice full sentences. So, for example, why did Hitler want to take over Poland? Answer number 1 would be, Hitler wanted to take over Poland because. Pause this, have a go at those tasks now. What actually happened in the Pact then? So on the 23rd of August 1939, an agreement was signed which shocked Europe. Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact. In public, this pact agreed that Russia and Germany would not fight each other, a shocking agreement for 2 countries who had previously expressed great hatred of each other's political systems. However, in secret, the agreement was even more shocking. Both countries agreed to attack Poland and divide it between them. For Hitler, there was a clear benefit. He could move on Poland without fear of the Soviet Union. Experience had taught Hitler the British and French were not serious about Poland expansion, so it now seemed there was nothing standing in the way of an attack on Poland. For Joseph Stalin, the Russian leader, the agreement also brought benefits. After the Munich conferences, Stalin was highly suspicious of British and French motives. It seemed that both countries were willing to give up Eastern Europe to Hitler as they didn't like the communist Soviet Union. Stalin felt the Soviet Union was under threat from Hitler, and no country would come to their defence. Therefore, it seemed very sensible for the Soviet Union to reach an agreement with Hitler over Poland and not to go to war with Germany. In addition, an attack on Poland would allow the Soviet Union to regain land they had lost to Poland at the end of the First World War. So, yet again, I'd like to put a side heading, this time the Nazi-Soviet Pact, and I'd like to pause this and have a go answering those 4 questions, again in nice full sentences, please. What were the results then? So Hitler now felt confident enough to invade Poland, as he did not think that anyone would stop him, even though he knew about the promise made by Britain to Poland. On the 1st of September, Hitler launched Blitzkrieg, that's known as Lightning War, on Poland, a joint attack by land and air. Britain sent a diplomatic note to Hitler demanding the withdrawal of German forces. Hitler was not convinced and felt the British were bluffing, and so the attacks continued. On the 3rd of September 1939, Chamberlain declared war on Germany. This announcement was followed by the French declaration of war on Germany. So we've finally got to war. Hitler has done the final step, which has forced the British and French into action. So again, pause this, put the side heading, result of the Nazi-Soviet Pact, and answer those 3 questions in full sentences for me, please. How significant was this then? I'd like you to add this to your notes, please, under how significant. So it was important, it was significant because Hitler now felt confident enough to invade Poland. He invaded just 9 days after the pact was signed. That really demonstrates to us that that is the thing that he'd been waiting for, just 9 days after the pact was signed. That tells us this was a really important event. On that 9th day, he launched his Blitzkrieg on Poland, and he wouldn't have done that if he'd felt that he was going to have to face war with the USSR. The Nazi-Soviet Pact was also important because it demonstrated that Hitler did not take Britain and France seriously, and therefore it highlighted the failures of appeasement. What Britain and France had done, as well as allowing Hitler to become stronger and more confident, is they pushed Soviet Russia away. The Russians did not feel that Britain and France would do anything to help and protect them. They felt that Russia felt that Britain would simply hand over Poland, like they'd handed over Czechoslovakia, like they'd handed over Austria, for example. And so the Russians believed that, Britain would backstab them, and so Hitler believed there's also no danger from Britain. The only thing that stood in his way had been Russia. The Nazi-Soviet Pact now put that obstacle out of the way. The invasion directly led to World War II because Britain and France did end their policy of appeasement. On the 3rd of September, Chamberlain declared war, and that was of course followed by the French declaration of war as well. In the final part of today's lesson, we're going to apply what we've learned about the Nazi-Soviet Pact to an exam-style question. So this is just one of those short 4-mark questions that we've done a few times before. So what we have now is we have a cartoon called Rendezvous. What I would like you to do in your exercise books, under the notes that you've already made, is just put maybe application, and then just list as many points as you can about what you can see in this cartoon. Just a little note here at the side to say what they're saying in case you can't read it on the original. Look at what's going on with the characters, look what's going on in the background, look at what they're saying. Make a list for about 1 minute of what you can see, and then we can have a think about what this means, about what people thought about the Nazi-Soviet Pact. What did I get then as I was looking at this? And let's compare it to what you've just written down. So both of these characters here that we can see, they're bowing out of respect to each other. So they're bending down. It looks as if they're respecting each other. They've also got their hand over their hearts. They really mean what they're saying. They really mean that this friendship is going to last now. But they're both dressed for war. They're surrounded by destruction. And of course, this is destruction of Poland in that blitzkrieg, in that lightning war launched by Hitler on the 1st of September, just 9 days after this pact was signed. So this meeting, this rendezvous, so a rendezvous is just a meeting at an agreed time and place. Sometimes a rendezvous might be kind of a secret meeting. And of course, this was a secret meeting that shocked the world. They're not bothered about what they've done. They don't care that there is a dead body on the floor. This probably represents Poland. They have between them killed Poland, because remember, the public terms of the agreement were that they were going to just not fight each other, but the secret terms of the agreement were they were going to divide Poland between them and conquer it. And that's exactly what Hitler started on the 1st of September. But this particular cartoonist is also showing that these people are insincere, that they are liars, they are frauds. They're making this vow and this friendship supposedly together, but it's just out of convenience. They don't really respect each other. Hitler calls Stalin scum. Stalin calls Hitler a bloody assassin, a murderer. We can tell from this that the cartoonist feels that the agreement will not last. This is a cartoon that is deeply critical of what Stalin and Hitler have done in the Nazi-Soviet Pact. Here's today's question then. So source A is critical of the Nazi-Soviet Pact. How do you know? If you're confused about it, listen to that last slide again. Take this back a couple of minutes and make sure you listen to what I'm saying, because not only when I'm talking you through it do I say how it's obvious that it's critical, but I pop in some knowledge there as well that you'll be able to use to help you answer this. So in order to answer this question, you're trying to pick out 2 observations. So it might be about their real words. It might be about what's happened to Poland on the floor. Any of that would be good observations from the source, but then support it with your own knowledge. So why might they be saying those words to each other? What do we know about what Russia and Germany really thought of each other? When Poland's on the floor, what had Germany done to Poland? So here, there's a couple of sentence starters that should get you on the right path to doing a good job for this answer. Take 5 minutes now, pause this, and have a go at that question in your exercise book. Send me your work afterwards, or send your teacher the work afterwards, so that they have a record of that you've understood this. Try that now. You're going to go back to your lesson on teams now, and you're going to decide on how significant you think this pact was. So you're going to decide whether you think, well, actually, it wasn't that big a deal, it wasn't that significant, it was quite significant, kind of, or extremely. So you're going to tell your teacher in the Q&A box what you think and why.